Welcome to Out of Home Insider, the loudest voice in out of home, and the first out of home podcast in the world to publish 100 episodes, a milestone that is truly reflective of this great community and all of the amazing guests that give the show its flavor. As with every great journey, this show started with a first step too. Way back on September 23rd, 2019, I sent today's guest a message on LinkedIn to see if he would be the first guest. He said yes, and the rest is history. In the beginning, it was just me, a free Zoom account, a 35 digital camera, and a MacBook Pro that wouldn't stay charged longer than 30 minutes. And I knew nothing about how to get a podcast on the internet, let alone how to get from episode 1 to 100. The number one thing I learned along the way from that process and from the guests is that the only discernible difference between people who make it and people who don't is that the people who make it just don't give up. That's it. The only difference is that they've quit fewer times than everyone else. So I hope that you take that with you too, wherever you are, to just not quit this time. And whether it's going from episode 0 to episode 1 or episode 1 to 100, here's to finding your tribe along the way, wherever your journey leads. So this is it, episode 100 with guest 001, James Heller, CEO of Wrapify, the first person to take a chance on yours truly during this journey. And a huge, huge thank you to OneScreen.ai for continuing to power the dream, to Sam and Greg and Andre for taking a chance on me in a totally different way. So without further ado, let's go.
Welcome everybody to the Out of Home Insider Show, a podcast like no other, hosted by the one and only Tim Rowe. Get ready to have some knowledge dropped on you and to be entertained, because nothing's more valuable than food for your brain. So sit back, relax, we're about to dive in as the best industry podcast is about to begin.
James Heller, 100 episodes ago, you said yes to a LinkedIn message. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know what out of home was. I didn't know how to run a podcast. I had a $35 camera and a MacBook Pro that couldn't stay charged longer than 30 minutes. But you said yes, and 100 episodes later, here we are. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So we were just riffing a little bit there on, what does it look like for out of home to grow from where we are today? The only traditional format that's continued to grow, as we've seen print and traditional television start to fade off. Talking about how do we go as an industry from 10 billion to the moon. I don't know how high we can go. So what do you think if we just pick up there?
Sure. Well, I mean, we got to first get to 10 billion in the US.
All right. Fair. We got to get to 10 billion.
But I mean, so kind of similar to you, 7 years ago, I had zero out of home experience outside of being on the buy side on a very, very small scale. But yeah, I mean, I saw a market need to create a platform that gave marketers like myself. I'm a digitally native marketer by trade, and I wanted to consume a media platform or use a media platform that felt like and had the metrics that I was used to being able to report to my financial organization on what I was spending and what it was doing in terms of driving a KPI for the marketing organization. So that combined with the rise of the gig economy, I thought, man, this would be such a cool product if I could measure it. And so that's kind of what, that was the ethos of Wrapify in the beginning. And so, as I learned, in the first couple of years, I learned so much about the space, and it really changed. It kind of rewired my brain and changed the way I approached building product, because about 7 years ago, when I entered the out of home world, media measurement was really, really, really far behind. And even if you look at it compared to today, so much has changed in the last 7 years in this space. And it's been really cool to see that. And there's a bunch of really cool companies doing a bunch of really cool things. But yeah, so for me, it was like, wow, I didn't realize out of home was such a small percentage of total media spend. I just assumed it was a much larger chunk of it, because it's awesome by the definition of awesome. You see it and just whoa, right? So I assumed that the size of the industry in the US was also going to be equally awesome, and it wasn't at all. So I think that's, what changed was, rather than trying to grab a chunk of a really small pie, our approach is really to like help grow the pie. And while the pie gets bigger, we get a bigger percent. We get a bigger piece of that small percentage that we're taking away from it. So yeah, if you were to just distill all that down, like the more you put in, the more you get out, is kind of how I'm approaching building a product in the out-of-home space. And I think that's what's changed the most since we had our first podcast in terms of the way I look at this space and how we're growing and how we're building.
It's becoming, it seems to be, and hopefully it is becoming more of a theme. I think that there are still probably two defined camps of, the folks that are thinking this way collectively. What's good for out of home is good for all of us. Rather than getting a medium pizza, why don't we get a large pizza? Because your slice just got bigger. I like more pepperoni. So why don't we try to make this the whole pie bigger? And I'm seeing that. We're seeing good collaboration. We're seeing, particularly on social, great shout outs from agencies to media partners, and just giving more of that recognition. But there is still a stalwart group that, hey, I saw you on, I saw an advertiser on my competitor's format. Let me try to get them to buy me now, and I'll compete on price. And it's a race to the bottom, right? And then the share of wallet never really gets any bigger because we're just cannibalizing one another's advertisers. And looking at a lot of the logos behind you, you've worked with a lot of brands that are new to out of home, or they're not even thinking about, they're not buying Wrapify because it's out of home. They're buying it because it's a performance channel, and it's more similar, as you spoke to what they're used to, digitally native performance marketers. These are metrics that I understand, and I'm able to build this into some of my media mix modeling. Where are you seeing like the conversation go with marketers specifically in terms of the expectation from us as an industry and what they ultimately want to achieve, which is being able to predictably scale their spend in the channel because it's working? Well,
I think one of the things that's happening, and this is pretty, I'd say this is pretty binary, is as each new year goes by, that the age of the marketer that's making decisions on behalf of brands and where they're coming from is trending more towards digitally native. So, a lot of the folks that control traditional media budgets and brand marketing budgets that were buying traditional out of home, many of them have now exited the market. They're retiring. They're no longer part of the space. And you've got this new guard. Like, think about it this way. Somebody's got 5 years of experience out of college. Right. 5 years of experience out of college. That means that they graduated in 2017?
Yeah.
2017, they entered the space. They made it become an associate at an agency, became a planner, or now a group director. And so again, they're coming from a place where many of these folks never experienced life pre-internet, right?
That's a great point.
They've
never known a world without.
They don't even know. Yeah, they've never experienced life pre-internet. I think my generation's probably the last one that got a smidge of pre-internet life, right?
Right.
So I think that really changes the way media buying and evaluating different media channels in this kind of going into the 2020, 2030 era of buying media. And so kind of going back to expansion of the pie, we've gone full circle. It's no longer traditional media trying to get used to buying digital. It's almost the other way around now.
Wow,
we've got digital folks that is now the new traditional.
Yeah.
And they're having to learn how to buy this age-old medium that's been around for hundreds of years. And I think that having mixed media modeling, having really good data visualization, having the ability to not just track impressions, but all the way through to attribution online, in-app, in-store, that is what digitally native marketers they need, they want. That's what they're used to. There's also something to be said about brand. And I think that's another thing that I actually agree with some of the legends in the out of home space, where there's the narrative is, well, there's something to be said about the importance of brand and using out of home as a medium to drive brand, because it is the heartbeat in the neighborhood, right? It is something that it is something that is really, really hard to like apply a digital metric to. And so that's another thing. Like when I'm talking to a performance marketer about the importance of brand, sometimes it's really hard. It's like almost like you're talking to a wall, because they don't get it. Sure.
There's no spreadsheet that calculates.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have a correlation.
Like, well, how do I? And I'm like,
brand.
Well, no, that is an important component of what you're spending, and also like what your company is doing in terms of your voice and your brand message and how your brand makes me feel when I see it. Right. That's a hard thing to measure sometimes.
It's a really hard thing to measure.
So I think there's like this kind of like split camp of it's not that one side is right, one side is wrong. They're both important. And I think we need to educate and articulate the value of our mediums to solve both of those problems. Like, it's not like, oh, well, brand's important, that's what out of home's for. Measurement's going to be secondary, and versus measurement's the most important thing, and brand is impossible to measure. So we're not going to care about that. So yeah, I think that's another, like, there's a new guard in terms of the folks that are evaluating and have purchasing power in the out-of-home space. And that's just evolving and changing because of the people who are entering the workforce and the people who are now going on 10 years of experience in the space. 10 years,
a decade.
Yeah. Like 10 years of experience in media buying is or people who are evaluating or have a decision makers in a media buying cycle. Like that's a pretty experienced person, right?
They bought a lot of media. And so knowing that the education gap is equal parts opportunity and maybe equal parts threat for the industry at large, our messaging doesn't, for me as a digitally native marketer, the messaging from our industry doesn't really align with those expectations. I don't know that I could send, a recent hey, 48% of millennials remember seeing a poster snippet, and that would be the convincing bit of data that pushed someone over the hump. So, okay, if the industry is maybe behind on messaging, and companies like Wrapify and companies that are understanding digital marketers, you're able to have a more direct conversation about this is how it works. How do we start to bridge that gap between kind of like the first movers and the rest of the industry at large, which we need to bring everybody along. We need to be singing from the same song. How do you envision that coming together with some of the, just fractured messaging across the industry?
I don't know that I have an easy answer there. I think it's kind of a hairball. Fair. I think part of it is we've got people who've been doing it a certain way for so long that changing that is going to be really, really difficult for some of those organizations. Some of them are such large slow moving animals that are just going to keep chugging along and getting bigger incrementally year over year. But why would they change? They're going to just keep doing it. So I think it really is up to the more innovative, smaller, scrappier, more nimble platforms that are entering the space to expand upon the pie. I think one of the things that's very similar to the platform you work for and Wrapify is that a bunch of the revenue we capture is from folks that may never have purchased out of home before in the past. Now, granted, we do work with a lot of big brands that buy a ton of out of home, but a big chunk of the revenue we capture is from the digital marketer that wants to use budget that was previously they might have been over indexing on Facebook, or they might have been basically getting diminishing returns on Google. And so they're looking at reallocating components of that budget to other things that could drive more value. And I think that is a big opportunity for out of home. And I think the only real way to capture that is by being able to help those individuals showcase the metrics that came from that spend.
Absolutely.
So I think it's, to distill that down, I think that we need to capture a component of wasted digital spend and get it piped into out of home, because it's more valuable here in many cases. Like if we were to just take the money that came from digital ad fraud, just push it into out of home. The value would, I would bet on the value of that being much higher than bot traffic, right? So I think
yes.
So I think, and if we were to just take that amount of revenue and move it into out of home, we'd probably double the revenue in the US.
Yeah, it's super
valid. And if
valid.
not double, a big step up from where we are today. I think we would cross the $10 billion mark in 2022.
Big step up. And it would make all the other stuff work better. It would make the pay-per-click work better. It'd make the paid social work better. It would that's the 1 + 1 = 3 factor that out of homes. Yeah, right. It's hard to quantify, but we know it's there.
Yeah. Well, so what's funny about that is this is kind of another piece about the out of home space that I think is kind of interesting. We still cite a article that Facebook put out about, and this is in Australia, about how it wasn't even the US, but how out of home made the Facebook ad spend more effective. The out of home industry still cites that. And we haven't done, and there are studies in the US that have been put out since then, but we should double down on that. It totally works. The recall that we create in the out of home space makes the digital more valuable. I think that's a really awesome narrative that brands should get behind because it works. I think that the other thing that's was interesting to me in the beginning, and then I've fallen victim to doing this, so I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but we post pictures of our wrap vehicles on our social all the time. But when was the last time you saw Facebook or Google screenshot an ad but some big brand was running on their channels and share it on their LinkedIn, right? I think it's cool. I think that we should showcase the awe that we create in the out of home space, but I think that we should spend more time showcasing what it actually did in terms of affecting the brand's performance and the marketing performance of the campaign. I think that would, as a marketer, if I could be okay, cool, but what did that actually do? What did it do for the brand? Oh, we deployed, these billboards in these markets, and we demographically targeted specific neighborhoods, and we saw a X percentage in revenue increase in these markets during the campaign period. Show me that kind of stuff more. It'd be cool if some of the bigger players in the space were able to do that. And I know it's a delicate dance too, because it's really hard to get the brand's permission to divulge or let you share metrics like that sometimes, or most of the time. But I think we should try a little harder. I think it would shine a bigger light on out of home.
I agree. I remember the first time that as a local billboard salesperson in Eastern Pennsylvania, I had asked an advertiser for Google Analytics access. It was a group that helped homeless men get back on their feet. They're about 2 blocks down from the county prison, and they give them a safe place to stay and get clean, and get some job skills and get the resumes updated and that sort of thing. And asked them for Google Analytics, and they did a digital billboard program across the market. And James, everything was up. Google conversion goals were up. Direct traffic was up. Organic traffic was up. Average website donation value was up. Everything was up. And that for me was setting the hook in the power of out of home. But when I started to socialize some of that data internally with the sales leadership, I was actually told, be careful how much you talk about that. And I thought, are you kidding me? As a digital marketer, I'd love to be able to increase my conversion goals by 90% by changing one tactic. I'd love to be able to do that anytime. But there was this, effort to kind of suppress that to avoid associating out of home with being a performance channel, which that to me was so crazy, but that was ultimately the inspiration for the podcast. And now we've seen that time and time again at One Screen, brands that have never done out of home, born online, spending $500,000 a month on Facebook ads. And they're saying, this doesn't scale. This is no longer effective for me. I need to test offline channels. I need to figure this stuff out now, because the good old days are gone. And if I don't figure it out now, I don't know what that's going to mean for my brand 12, 18, 24 months from now. So they're coming in and they care about really two things. Can you reach my audience in a way that is aligned with my brand budget and goal? And can you give me directional feedback? Can you show me what the impact of that was in my Google Analytics? Can you show me with something more deterministic than that? Brands are just looking for, at this point, can you reach my audience and give me directional feedback? Like, the bar is still very low right now. And that's such an opportunity for brands to test and play and do a lot of things that they've never been able to do before, to introduce out of home to marketers who've typically deployed a lot of money online, but haven't gotten an opportunity to play with the canvas that we offer, and to be able to talk to brands about things that they never even knew that they could do or measure. And then to see the relief and the excitement about, hey, I'm going to be able to keep growing my company. And in a fun, engaging way. Are you seeing similar stories with the brands that you're working with? Like, what's the feedback been after they get a taste for what you're able to deliver?
Well, usually it starts, and it's kind of interesting because we built 2022's marketing message at Wrapify around this theme of, I didn't know you could do that. And the reason why we did that is, when we're talking, or when we're having the opportunity to speak with a brand about our platform, and usually when we're talking about our platform, we're not talking about like, you need to buy just Wrapify, don't buy any other stuff. Like, we're the end all be all. Like, no, we're usually talking about like how Wrapify works with your large format traditional, your digital, like how it's kind of the intersection between out of home and digital. And when we walk them through our dashboards and the attribution that we provide, the ability to trigger multi-channel retargeting, and then that light bulb goes off, and it's usually along the lines of, oh wow, I didn't know you could do that. We thought you were just a car wrapping company. We thought you just wrapped Ubers and Lyfts, and that was where the beginnings and ends of your value were. And so I think that doubling down on education is important. I think it's important for us to share more about the performance and less about like just pictures of billboards and wrapped cars and buses and, all the different things that are in the out of home space in terms of the physical. I think it's important to showcase those, but I think we should spend a little bit more time showcasing the metrics if we can. I think that will help elevate the space. Go ahead, finish that thought. I think it'll help elevate the space if more marketers are getting, because it's still not known. Like, we talked to some pretty big brands about Wrapify, and about Wrapify and the media measurement we bring to the table. And we also tell them like, hey, this is not just exclusive to Wrapify. Like, you can get attribution for like all the other stuff. You're able to do a lot of really, really interesting things in the out-of-home space. Like, this is stuff that you should be evaluating. This is stuff that you should really consider integrating into your media mix. And it's always like, oh, wow, we just thought this is like a brand top of the funnel brand marketing thing that we couldn't measure. So we hear it often.
Yeah, I believe that we hear the same accord, and something that we don't hear as often, particularly with these types of marketers who are trying to reach an audience and drive an outcome, is there's not a whole lot of conversation around what's your CPM. Typically, when we hear someone asking about a CPM, it's a little bit of a step back for us. And okay, have we missed a step here? Is this a good fit for the type of campaign that we're going to do here, and that the marketers we're working with? Can you reach my audience, right? And can you give me some sort of feedback? Because if you can, right, if you can show me that if I give you $1, it creates $3, then it's not really a conversation about what was the cost of $1, right? It's just how many times can I give you $1 and you can give me 3 back. Is that consistent with conversations that you're having? Is there as much of an emphasis on CPMs when you're talking to performance marketers?
It was more so in 2017, 2018, kind of going into 2020. But no, I mean, because CPM is really more about like how cheap is this for the amount of people I could reach,
right?
But the thing is, like, you can have a really low CPM and not have a good outcome.
Sure, it can be trash.
Yeah, you could have you could pay a $3 CPM and then have nothing to show for it, right? You didn't save any money. You just paid for a really, really cheap CPM that didn't drive a marketing outcome. So I think, there's more of an emphasis on the outcome, the CPA and
right.
Like the percentage lift and incremental conversion, like that's where the magnifying glass is. That's where I think marketers should be more focused. And I think for the most part are more focused.
I agree. 2022 is underway at this point. Wrapify is growing quickly. You're building, you've got, I think, a first-time CFO. You've got a VP of marketing. You're building out an SDR team. Talk to me a little bit about what does the next year look like for Wrapify?
Well, right now we're acting on the plan that we were planning on deploying in 2020 with 2020 and 2021 behind us. So actually, like, while that was a very challenging time and, 1 million plus people have perished as a result of that, we don't take that lightly. It was not a fun time for the world, and we're still dealing with it. But it did help us harden some metrics. It helped us avoid some pitfalls that we might have been faced with if we didn't experience 2020. So again, like, I think it's another example of hard times can create good men and women.
Amen.
This year is really just doubling down on everything we've learned in the last 7 years, and expanding and taking what's not just now in my head, but bring folks to the team that are smarter and better at their jobs than the one than me trying to do a bunch of those things. So I'm personally very excited about that. But yeah, like expanding the sales organization, building a real marketing organization, building out the executive leadership team and scaling the business it's something that I've been driving towards now for 7 years. And I'm really excited about it.
We've gone 0 to 1, 1 to 100. It's been a little bit over 2 years. James Tyler, I can't thank you enough for you'll always be episode number 1. You were the first one to say yes, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So I'm really, really appreciative of you coming back 100 episodes later. For folks that don't know how to find you online, where are you most active? What's the Latin long? Give folks the lowdown on how to find James Tyler and learn more about Wrapify.
I mean, LinkedIn is absolutely the most active place that you'll see me. So find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you could reach me at my email. It's just the letter J@wrapify.com. Easy
enough. Well, we'll see you at 1,000. James, thanks so much for being here. If you found this episode to be helpful, please share it with somebody who could benefit. As always, make sure to smash that subscribe button down in the corner. And wherever you're listening to this, please throw the podcast a follow. It always helps. And we'll see y'all next time.
Quarter century, I finally came to my senses. I finally got my hand up on the tinted Benz, kid. I see the world clear through my tinted lenses. With the dream and the drive, the possibilities endless. Now print that, send this all the way to Tokyo. Take a trip down south, down to Mexico. Next stop, Shanghai, the world-class trade show. First class all the way, cause that's how we roll. Yeah, call us the rock star businessman. Rockin' shows, we handle business, man. We got our own future in the palm of our hands, cause divided